We've seen this complete swing in British fiscal policy.
We will cut the basic rate of income tax to 19 pence.
This 2-month-long era of Trussonomics is over.
The basic rate of income tax will remain at 20%.
The government has proved incapable.
I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party.
There are fundamental problems with the economy that are beginning to show themselves right now.
And that is probably the impact of Brexit. So inflation is about 10% in Britain. It's been around the double digits for the last few months. That's the highest level since the early 1980s, the highest level in 40 years. The primary driver is really high global energy prices. Energy bills have gone up considerably, but it's not just any more energy prices. If we look at core inflation, that's excluding volatile things like food and energy, that's also the highest it's been in about 30 years. The Bank of England thinks that's because we've got a very tight jobs market with more job vacancies than unemployed people, and that tight jobs market is pushing up wages and adding to domestic inflationary pressure. Britain has struggled to recover from the pandemic compared to its peers. We're one of the few major economies where GDP is still below the pre-pandemic level. And that is probably the impact of Brexit. It was during the pandemic that we actually left the European Union, that the new trading relationships were put in place. And that's almost certainly held back both business investment in Britain and export growth. From 2016, after that vote, all the way until the early 2020s, when we got the deal that we got, there was just a huge amount of uncertainty. And lots of business investment was either postponed or cancelled. And the level of business investment in the British economy lagged behind other advanced economies while we had that uncertainty. Well, we don't have the uncertainty now, and instead we've got the trade deal. What that trade deal has done is it's added frictions into what was previously a frictionless border with our nearest, largest and richest trading partner. And if you put frictions into that trading relationship, you get less trade. And that's what we've seen. We've seen slower growth in British exports than in many other advanced economies. We've seen it being a bit harder to import, which has probably added to inflation in Britain. But I think more generally, and more importantly, what we've seen has been a sort of an undermining of the institutional credibility of British policymakers with global markets.
Britain's reputation on the world stage has already been dealt some pretty harsh and stinging blows. The Egyptian delegation in Washington, D.C. at an IMF meeting were joking that the Egyptian pound has better prospects on the world exchange rate than the British pound. For the pound to almost reach parity with the dollar feels like a stinging blow.
What's been really sad over the last few weeks is seeing how we're sort of being discussed as a cautionary tale in the same way that, David Cameron and George Osborne used to point to problems in Italy and problems in Greece in the early 2010s. We've become this sort of textbook example of a reckless policy decision which gets an immediate and brutal market reaction, and you don't want to be the textbook case.
We've just had 12 years of a Conservative government in one way, shape or form. Multiple Conservative prime ministers. But in 2010, when they came first, they won an election on a policy platform of dealing with our debts, sorting out the deficit. Pretty much, they were an open book on what they were going to do with the economy, which was the introduction of austerity. At the time, the country was relatively tacitly supportive of the ideas of austerity. When you put to voters that we should deal with our debts, that we should keep, we should spend less than we make, we should earn more than we spend, most voters would agree with that. But you've just had 12 years of that. And public attitudes, public opinion has shifted since. The country is a lot less tolerant about the ideas of austerity than they used to be 12 years ago. We are not the country where politics is shaped by scroungers versus strivers. We have changed. Don't get me wrong. We are still, socially quite conservative than other countries, a little bit more than other countries, a little bit better than other countries, but we have shifted away from the 2010s. We have shifted away from 2015. And so for Jeremy Hunt, a figure of 2010 and 15, to come in and sort of act like, Osborneomics or Cameronism 2.0, austerity 2.0, to come in and think that he can reintroduce that to the country and get away with it, I think the country's going to have something to say about that, and it's not going to go down quite well.